All right. So, like I said, we're talking about Valley Forge, and it took place in the winter of 77 and 78. George Washington and Marquez de Lafayette were the commanders. What country was Marquez de Lafayette from?
France.
He was from France, okay? Marquez de Lafayette is from France. He is going to be a leader in the American Revolution. He comes over from France and he's going to help out the United States. It took place on a military camp in the Continental Army. Washington and his men were not supplied well. Sound familiar? Okay? That's kind of the continuing story of the entire war. That's what is the crazy part of how did the Americans win the revolution, when they're constantly undersupplied, constantly undermanned. They were always outmanned, usually by the British Army, but still they somehow find a way to win. What do we remember about the Americans' battle style? How are they going to fight in the war? What was their battle style like in the war? They line up and take turns firing at each other like the British did? Okay. Okay. The Americans, the British, how war was fought back then, the British would all line up in lines and they would take their turn firing, and then the other army would take their turn firing back. And so that's not how the Americans are going to fight back. They were inspired by, especially people like from the French and Indian War, the French and the Indians, where they fight more like they do in wars today, where you're scattered around, finding coverage, and shooting, retreating, taking cover, right? That's how modern war works, and that's kind of how they were doing it. It's called guerrilla warfare. So this battle is leading up to the end of the war. Let's see. Okay, next. So the leaders, again, were George Washington. He never left his men during the winter, and they were on the verge of springtime, just trying to get their training done. That's another recurring theme about a couple of the battles in the Revolutionary War, is that it was very cold. Okay, the men in George Washington's army, not super well clothed. A lot of them didn't have proper shoes for the snow or proper gloves and stuff like that. So a lot of them are gonna get kind of just homesick and wanting to go home because they're so cold and they're tired of being there. But it's because of George Washington's leadership that he's able to convince all the soldiers to keep fighting on. And then do what? Oh yeah. So let's see. So here are some of the hardships. Like I said, the winter was very deadly. Soldiers did not often have clothes or blankets or shoes. There's a limited amount of food, and horses are dying, and an average of 10 people died a day at Valley Forge. Many of Washington's help, they left him. They were homesick. They abandoned him, so Washington's having to lead an army that are cold, freezing, low on food, and peacing out. He had 11,000 soldiers, 500 women and children, so finding shelter was an issue. It led to lots of disease because they were all huddled up around each other, and the disease was killing lots of men. So overall, not a very good, not the ideal weather and culture to be around, because it was so cold, lack of food, people were getting sick. But Washington is pushing his men to work, and he ends up letting most of his soldiers survive. Because of his leadership, he keeps most of his soldiers alive. They found animals to hunt, so that they were getting more clothing, more food from the animals. And as it got warmer, more of them were able to work. They were getting prepared for the battles ahead. And one of those battles that's ahead is the Battle of Yorktown. So remember the Battle of Trenton from yesterday, Trenton and Princeton. What was the weather like in Trenton and Princeton? We did that worksheet. It was also very cold, okay? Very cold at Trenton and Princeton. When did they attack on Trenton?
On Christmas.
On Christmas, okay? So they're attacking around Christmas. It was very cold. Then same situation at Valley Forge. Very cold. Lack of clothing, lack of food.
Who was it that put up campfires and stood 100 soldiers?
Yeah, that was George Washington. George Washington set up a decoy.
Wait, with real soldiers or not?
Real soldiers.
No, they were plastic.
Real soldiers. He had them set up fires and bang on stuff and make a bunch of noise for the British to come up and attack. But the actual rest of the whole army was already on their way elsewhere for another attack.
So then what happened to those people?
They were probably captured and they would have been probably prisoners. No, I don't know. Alright, but we're all leading up to the Battle of Yorktown. Yorktown is the final battle of the Revolutionary War. Washington's getting help from who? From France.
They finally shot.
What's the guy's name from France? Lafayette. Okay, Lafayette is one of the French that's going to help the Americans. It's the last battle of the American Revolution. Let's see. So, Battle of Yorktown, our general is General George Washington. He was the commander of the Continental Army, led the colonists to two huge victories. We already talked about Trenton and Princeton. And then General Lord Charles Cornwallis was the commander at Yorktown. So he's the commander of the British. So here's the American commander, George Washington, the British commander, Charles Cornwallis. Here's some pictures. There's Washington. This is Cornwallis in his red coat. And here is Lafayette.
Why they always got that weird looking hair?
Yeah, he just
Because they wore wigs back then.
He looks better in his school.
Battle of Yorktown, September 28, 1781. The Americans surrounded Cornwallis and the British fleet at Yorktown. Washington ordered Lafayette to block the British advance by sea with 5,000 troops. So they've got the army surrounded on the land, and Lafayette's with his men in the sea, and they're blocking off the British from entering in from the sea. On October 9th, the American and the French weapons and cannons were ready to fire on the British after they have a skirmish with each other. Then on October 10th, so like 2 weeks later, the Americans spot a building that they think Cornwallis is there, and they open fire on this building, but Cornwallis, he gets away.
Wait, Coach Bolton.
Yes.
We should have learned about this tomorrow. Because it would have been closer to October 10th.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's on
Yeah.
Saturday.
That's funny. So the French ships open fire on the British ships. So this is Lafayette and his men. With the French, they're opening fire, and there's a battle, a naval battle, and the French are able to destroy some of the British ships. Then the French and the American troops start to storm the British and the German troops. What was the name of the German troops for hire?
Hessians.
Hessians. Very good, JT. Cornwallis ordered Robert Abercrombie to destroy the French and American cannons. The French stormed them out with the cannons fixable. Okay, after which battle does the French come and decide that they're going to help the colonies?
Trenton.
Not Trenton, but it was one we talked about yesterday.
It was like the hill. I don't know how.
No, not that one either. It was one we talked about yesterday. We read the paper over
I
it.
just said that.
We read the paper over it yesterday.
Princeton.
Starts with an S. Starts with an S.
Saratoga.
There you go. Saratoga.
Oh.
Okay, after the Battle of Saratoga is when the French are going to decide to help the Americans.
Yeah.
Last days of the Revolution. On October 17th, 1781, the British finally surrendered to the American forces after 3 weeks of tough battle. October 19th, 1781 was the formal surrender ceremony, but Cornwallis, the leader of the British, he didn't attend. He said he was sick.
Coward.
Okay. And then here's some pictures. Here's Cornwallis. Their surrender.
Cornwallis didn't surrender. Oh yeah, hey, Coach Fulton, another thing? See, on that surrendering thing, because Cornwallis wasn't there, George Washington is in the background.
Wow.
He's not the one on the horse
Oh yeah.
leading the surrender.
Okay, and then we need to know that this is the Treaty of Paris. Okay, the Treaty of Paris is what ended the American Revolution. This is the British agreeing to their surrender after 8 years. The Treaty of Paris is signed by Great Britain, France, and the United States, granting that America got its independence from Great Britain in 1783. Yep, started in 1775, then ended in 83. Okay, so let's kind of review everything that we've talked about up to this point that's going to be on the test. Okay, so last Monday we talked about the French and Indian War. Okay, what happened with the French and Indian War? Who won the war, and what happened as a result of that war? Okay, you said France.
Indian.
That's a good Britain.
Great Britain won the French and Indian War. Okay, Great Britain won the French and Indian War, but what happened as a result?
They came together.
Cameron.
They went into debt.
They went into lots of debt. Very good. Okay, so they went into lots of debt because of winning the French and Indian War. Then, as a result, after that war, it was fought over the territory in the Ohio River Valley. And what did Great Britain say that territory was going to be for, Austin?
For the Native Americans.
Okay, that territory is for the Native Americans. What said that territory was for the Native Americans?
Proclamation.
Was it?
It's the
So, the proclamation of
1763.
1763. Okay, very good. So after the French and Indian War, Great Britain writes up the Proclamation of 1763. What did the Proclamation of 1763 say, Noah? Noah? What did the Proclamation of 1763 say? Okay, what did it say, Austin?
Basically, it's their land, and if you go in
Okay.
there, they have the
It
right
says
to
all land where? West of what?
West
The Appalachian Mountains.
Very good. West of the Appalachian Mountains, that land's for the Native Americans. Okay, who's going to be upset about that? That land, the colonists. Okay, why are they going to be upset?
Because
Because
they
it
fought
was
a
a
war
war
to
to
win
the
that
people.
land.
Okay, they just fought a war over that land, and they didn't even get to keep that land. It was preventing them from expanding which direction?
West.
North.
West. Very good. Okay, it was preventing them from expanding west.
which is the way they needed to go to get farther into the United States.
Very good. Okay, so that's why the colonists are going to be upset with that proclamation. So then the British have all this debt. What is the British's plan to pay off their debt? What's the British's plan to pay off their debt, Augie? How are they going to pay their debt off?
I don't know.
Okay, Christian.
Tax everyone.
Okay, they're going to come up with some taxes. What are some taxes that they are going to come up with, Maya? Give me one.
Stamp. Stamp.
Okay, the Stamp Act is a tax. What else? Okay, the Tea Act, very good. And one more pretty big one, Austin.
The lead.
Not lead, starts with a T. Christian,
Oh.
you know?
The sugar.
What about marriage papers?
Sugar Act is one, yes. There's one more that starts with a T. Who remembers that one? Braden?
Tax Act.
No? Town.
Township Act.
The Township Act, okay? So, what all is particularly frustrating about those taxes? Taxes are already frustrating, but what also were the American colonists upset about, Maya?
The price went down. Oh no, they couldn't.
Austin?
They used this stuff every single day, so it was a good part of their life.
Okay, they did use this stuff every single day. They come up with this phrase though that they say. Yes.
Sorry.
Cameron, you know it?
No taxation without representation.
Very good. So that's what also is going to really upset them. They're saying no taxation without representation. They're saying, how can you tax us if we don't even get our own say? We can't even say how much our taxes are going to be or when we should be taxed. They're saying it's unfair. There should be no taxation unless we are represented. Okay, that's a direct. The Stamp Act is going to be a direct response to that. Is no taxation without representation. You can't give us the Stamp Act and make us pay all these taxes on things like this if we're not represented. Okay, so that we have lots of taxes. The British start to hear how upset the colonists are. They're going to repeal all their taxes except for one. Which one do they keep?
The Tea Act.
The Tea Act. Okay, they keep the Tea Act. And did the Tea Act make the prices of tea more expensive, or did it make it cheaper? It actually made tea cheaper, but why are the colonists still upset about that, the Tea Act, Noah? Why are the colonists still upset about the Tea Act, even if it's going to make tea cheaper? Who's going to be affected by it? Who's going to be affected by the Tea Act and it making tea cheaper?
You know what colony?
I remember, like.
Okay, who's going to be affected, Braden?
Other people who normally sell the tea, because the British give the tea to them to sell. But now because of the Tea Act, the British are just selling.
Very good. So the people that sell the tea are going to be really affected. And what's the word for that, Braden? The merchants. Okay, the tea merchants, the American merchants. Those are the guys that are going to be really hurt by the Tea Act because tea is the most popular product in the colonies. So as a response to the Tea Act, how do the Americans respond, Bryson? What do the Americans do in response to the Tea Act?
I know.
Christian, what do the Americans do in response?
They dump the tea into the
Very good.
river.
What's that called?
River.
The Boston Tea Party. They poured into the Boston Harbor. It's called the Boston Tea Party. Okay? Now who's going to get upset by that?
The
The British. Okay? So what did the British do in response to the Boston Tea Party, Augie?
Oh. I don't know.
They come up with something, as a response.
Sons of Liberty.
No.
tea.
They
Something about
Oh, yeah. So they make sure
And they
that
can't have any trades. They
Very good. What's that called?
Isolation.
Close. It starts with an I. It's
Intolerable.
very good. Okay, JT. The Intolerable Acts were a response to the Boston Tea Party. Intolerable Acts. Okay. The Americans are upset with how Boston's treated. They're upset about how the Boston Massacre happened, how the Redcoats killed 5 colonists. They're upset about the Intolerable Acts. So they come together and they hold what?
A meeting.
A meeting, okay? It's called the Continental Congress, okay? And in the first Continental Congress, they decide what about exports and imports. Yes. Okay, they're going to no longer do what to Great Britain? No longer
Trade.
Okay, they're no longer going to buy any more products from Great Britain. They're no longer going to buy any products, and then they're going to give it 1 year, and then they're going to, in that 1 year, they're only going to sell their products to Great Britain for 1 more year, then no more. Okay? Then later on, things still aren't changing, so they hold a second Continental Congress. What happens at the second Continental Congress? That second meeting, what do they decide?
Declare war.
Okay, they're going to declare war. So 2 big things happened in that second Continental Congress. One was someone's named Commander-in-Chief. Who was named Commander-in-Chief? No? Of the U.S. Army. Who's Commander-in-Chief? Should be an easy. That's an easy one.
No,
Who's Commander-in-Chief? Who's the leader of the American Army?
No, Abraham first president.
First president.
Right there.
No, look up
Did
there.
you really not know who the first president is?
No, I don't pay attention to history.
Bryson. George Washington. Come on, pay attention, Noah. George Washington is named Commander-in-Chief. Okay? And then something else is going to be drafted and written up at the Second Continental Congress. What do you think it is?
Declaration of Independence.
Declaration of Independence. Okay, so the big accomplishments of the Second Continental Congress, George Washington's named Commander-in-Chief, and the Declaration of Independence is drafted. Okay? But something that happened just before the
Boston Massacre.
the Boston Massacre is before. There's something else though that had already happened. Okay. What was the shots heard around the world?
Oh, that was at Lexington.
Very good, Lexington. Okay. Lexington was the shots heard around the world.
Can I grab like 5 from you?
Yeah. Shots heard around the world, Lexington. It happened just before the Second Continental Congress. So, was the Declaration of Independence, was it drafted before, during, or after the Revolutionary War?
Oh, wait.
It was before.
Yeah, it was. No, it was. Well,
Okay.
Lexington wasn't
What about
the battle,
So,
I think it was
Lexington was which battle in the Revolutionary
the
War?
first one.
The first battle. Okay, so the first battle happened. Lexington and Concord, shots heard around the world. The response to that was the Continental Congress. They named George Washington commander-in-chief. They drafted the Declaration. Then there's all the other battles. So did it happen before, during, or after? During, right? It happened during the war is when the Declaration was drafted, because before the war, I mean, at the beginning, there's Lexington and Concord, okay? At Lexington and Concord, who warned Samuel Adams and John Hancock the British were coming?
Yes. He read.
Who warned them, Augie?
I just said it.
Who warned them, Cameron?
What?
Who warned them that the British were coming at Lexington?
I know who.
Maya?
Oh, wait.
Paul Revere. Okay, Paul Revere is going to warn them that the British are coming at, and where's he warn them at?
He wants some
And the hometown.
What
At
city?
their house.
What city?
Lexington.
Lexington. He warns them at Lexington that the British were coming. Okay, so that's the first battle. Then the Declaration is drafted. Okay, next we have the Battle of Fort Ticonderoga. Was that a huge battle? Huge military skirmish, lots of shots, bloody battle?
No.
Yes.
Okay, what happened at Ticonderoga?
one in monkey. I don't know.
What happened? It was
I
the one that 0 shots were fired.
Oh,
They
that's the
stole-
one where they snuck
They
in
stole
and-
ammunition, snuck in, the front door was open, the guard was asleep, they sneak in and steal ammunition,
And they
and
woke up to their guns pointed out.
yeah, without even firing a shot.
Totally not
Who
sus
just
at all.
leaves the door open?
Yeah,
Exactly.
they
And then the
weren't
grandpa was asleep.
expecting visitors.
They didn't
Okay.
care about it.
Then Battle of Bunker Hill. Who can tell me why the Battle of Bunker Hill was still considered a victory for the Americans?
Because
Why was it still considered a victory, Augie?
Because the other people lost many soldiers.
Very good. The British, they lost many soldiers, okay? Some of them were
7 captains.
captains and leaders, right? Some of those were leaders, and so they lost some irreplaceable soldiers at Bunker Hill. Then we have Trenton and Princeton. Which river did George Washington cross?
Delaware.
Okay, cross the Delaware. What was the weather like at Trenton and Princeton?
It was freezing.
Freezing cold. Okay. But the Americans still overcome all those obstacles and win Trenton and Princeton. Then we have Battle of Saratoga. Okay, Battle of Saratoga is important because why? Who remembers? Talked about it yesterday. It was an article we read.
Acetate.
No, that's not it. Okay, why is Saratoga important? Because there's 2 things. The Americans win this battle. Okay, who helps out the Americans?
French.
Okay. We got to understand that the Battle of Saratoga was important because the Americans won the battle, another battle that they weren't expected to win, and now the French are starting to realize that the Americans could actually win this battle, especially with some help. Okay, so the French are going to go and decide to help out the Americans because of a victory at what battle? Battle at Saratoga. Okay, so it's boosting the confidence of the Americans that they can win big battles, and they're getting help from the French. What was the guy that was from France that helped the Americans in the war? Lafayette. Lafayette. Okay, Lafayette helps the Americans at Saratoga. Why would the French want to help out the Americans? Why were they a little bit upset with Great Britain?
Because the French didn't win the war.
Very good, JT. The French had just lost to Great Britain in the French and Indian War. So they're going to be upset with Great Britain and want to get revenge. So that's why they're going to also help the American
I'm
colonists.
sure it just made it even matter that they just threw the land out there.
Yeah. So in that article on Monday we read, we talked about the Founding Fathers. what did George Washington say was something that was particularly difficult about being a leader in the war?
I remember.
What did George Washington say was difficult about being a leader in the
Not
war?
having unjustified.
Very good. Okay, having to leave your family. So George, all the founding fathers are having to put their civic duty, their duty of being a leader in the country over a lot of their personal interests, over their family, and they're having to put their fortunes they're putting their money into it, they're putting their hard-earned work into it. Okay, they're kind of giving it their all, basically. They're putting their country over often their families. Okay, and then today we have Valley Forge and Yorktown. Valley Forge, what was the weather like at Valley Forge?
Wait.
It was also very cold at Valley Forge. Okay, soldiers are
10 dying a day.
10 dying a day. Lots of them are underclothed and losing food. But who gets them through that? George Washington. Okay, his leadership kind of pushes the soldiers through that. And then the final battle is the battle where?
Yorktown.
Very good. The Battle of Yorktown is the final battle. Okay, final battle of the Revolutionary War is Yorktown. So it's significant because why?
Because that's the final battle and they win it.
Final battle. Americans win Yorktown. The British, Cornwallis, he's the leader of the British. They surrendered, and they are going to recognize America as independent, and they recognize them by signing a treaty. What is that treaty called? It was on the slide just a minute ago. They signed this treaty called the Treaty of Paris. Very good, JT. The Treaty of Paris is important because why?
Because that gave America independence.
Very good. It gives America independence with the Treaty of Paris. Okay? So that's pretty much all we've covered in the last 2 weeks. You guys did a good job answering questions.